Good day, everyone. Today we are going to talk about art philosophical investigations by Ludwig Wittgenstein. So, we are going to talk about and learn about the philosophy behind language. We are going to deep dive into the nature of our words and its different complexities. It is going to be quite a long ride, so lay back, relax, and most importantly, get ready to learn something new. Before we start talking about the sections of the book, let's talk about the background information of the author first. Ludwig Joseph Johann Wittgenstein. He is considered by some as the greatest philosopher of 20th century. He was born on April 26, 1889 into one of the richest families of 1900s Vienna. He died on April 29, 1951 because of prostate cancer. Wittgenstein was not an exceptional student, but did well enough in school to pursue studies in aeronautical engineering at the University of Manchester. Studying engineering made him interested in mathematics, and he was also interested in philosophy that underlies mathematics. Gottlob Frege recommended him to study at Cambridge with Bertrand Russell, a fellow philosopher. After publishing Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, he felt that he already solved all philosophical problems, so he then moved on to different interests of his. Now, to formally start, we are going to state the St. Augustine's quotation. And I quote, "One day my elders named some object and accordingly moved towards something. I saw this and I grasped that the thing was called by the sound they uttered when they meant to point it out. Their intention was shown by their bodily movements, as it were the natural language of all peoples. The expressions of the face, the play of the eyes, the movement of their other parts of the body, and the tone of voice which expresses our state of mind in seeking, having, rejecting, or avoiding something. Thus, as I heard words repeatedly used in their proper places in various sentences, I gradually learned to understand what objects they signified, and after I had trained my mouth to form these signs, I used them to express my own desires." So, in this quotation, St. Augustine describes how we typically learn language. We associate names with the pictures of objects. Name plus object or the picture of the object equals meaning. And it also suggests that every word has meaning. The problem with this view of language is that how about those things that we cannot point out? Paano yung dreams? Paano yung word na dreams? Paano yung words na fears, love, hope? Can you point out the word love the same way you point out a chair? No, diba? So that's the problem with this Augustinian view. Next, we have section 1, the shopkeeper thought experiment. 5 red apples. So, this scenario shows how we operate or process words. Wittgenstein gives us an example where a person gives a note to the shopkeeper. The note contains 3 words: 5 red apples. So, the shopkeeper then opens the drawer marked apples, and then he will find a color sample opposite it. Okay, so this is red, he says. Then he says the series of cardinal numbers: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He takes an apple of the same color as the sample out of the drawer. So now he has 5 red apples. So, how did the shopkeeper know the meaning of apples? Of 5, of red. So, he knew the meaning of apples and red through visualization. So, through the visualization of apple, the word apple was on the drawer. The color of red was seen by his eyes. And through the sample color. But, paano naman yung number 5? Meron bang object na tawag ay 5? Di ba wala? There's no visualization or object that is named 5. Thus, we view meaning in cases where there are no objects as how something is done or used instead of how it is visually seen. Katulad ng paggamit ng shopkeeper sa word na 5. How do we use the word 5? Through counting something. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this means that language and meaning are not straightforward. Language and meaning are much more complex than how Augustine views it to be. So let's move on to section 2, primitive idea of how language functions. To understand what this means, we have an example. A makeup artist is working on a client and has an assistant. The makeup artist tells her assistant, makeup brush, foundation, lipstick. The assistant then brings the makeup brush, foundation, lipstick. So the makeup artist orders the word or says the word, and the assistant acts on it. This is what Wittgenstein believes to be the primitive or earliest idea of how language works. Now, sections 3 to 4. Augustine's oversimplification of language. Augustine's view, we can say, is an appropriate description of language. Kasi totoo naman na pag pinoint natin or yung name ng isang bagay ay masasabi din nating meaning niya. Katulad ng cellphone. Ang cellphone ay cellphone, di ba? So however, it is not complete kasi ang cellphone ay hindi lang cellphone. So ano ba ang function ng cellphone? So yun yung kulang. It is not the whole description of language. It is as if saying a game consists in moving objects about on a surface according to certain rules. We know that the description and the definition of games is much more complex than just being moving objects on a surface. Merong different types, kinds, forms, levels of games. Merong board games, merong video games, at meron pang iba. Example din ito, in a script, there are paragraphs containing sentences. And the sentences contain words. And these words are made up of letters. Ngayon, letters represent sounds, and emphasis, and punctuation, and so much more functions. Now imagine someone reading the script as it is, literally, with only acknowledging the words, the sounds these letters make, without understanding the other functions of letters. But the problem is, functions of letters are also meanings. Next, sections 5 to 6 and 9. Ostensive teaching. Ostensive means directly or clearly demonstrative. So, ostensive teaching establishes an associative connection between a word and a thing. So, ito, yung cellphone, associated natin yung word na cellphone dito sa thing na to. A child imagines the picture of a cellphone when we say the word cellphone in their mind. To further understand ostensive teaching, here is an example. When you tell a child what is a chair, the first thing na maiisip niya ay yung itsura ng chair, or he will visualize the chair in his mind. Now, children learn words to signify when adults train them to associate this object to this name or word. For example, we teach babies to say their first word by pointing out or pointing to their mom and saying, Mama. So the baby associates the pointed face or the person as Mama. Another example of this is teaching this and that. When we learn this and that in elementary English, the teacher probably demonstrated by using their pointing fingers. This as they point something near themselves, and that as they point something near us. So, ostensive teaching is not enough because it does not teach children the function and purpose of the object. It just merely teaches us the names and labels, but does not include the actual meaning or description, the purpose of the object or word. Hindi natin tinuturo sa mga bata na, ano ba talaga yung mama? So pag narinig niya yung ibang bata na nagsabi ng mama, isipin niya na yung tinatawag nila na mama, mama mo din, di ba? Now for the next section, sections 7 to 8. Language games and expansion of language. The language games is a philosophical concept where you learn to speak the language, you speak the language, and you do activities using the language. So parang pag-aaral din kung paano ba maglaro ng isang game. So it is very similar to games. First, you need to learn the basic of the game. So, paano ba malalaman or paano ba malalaro ang isang laro? Una, you need to learn the rules, the goals, the movements, the roles. Second, you need to use this knowledge or known context of the game to be able to function as a gamer. So, gagamitin mo na yung mga natutunan mong basics. So, first, aralin mo muna. So, paano ba tumakbo, paano lumakad. After that, lalakad ka na, tatakbo ka na sa game. And then third, when you already master the basics, so alam mo na yung pasikot-sikot ng laro, alam mo na paano maka-level up, you master the basics, the controls, actions. Now, leveling up means expanding your knowledge and skills about the game. So, siguro magtutur na ka na, or magiging like, i-aim mo na mag-level up. Or mas matutunan pa paano yung cheats, paano yung builds, gano'n. So, your knowledge and skills about the game expands. So, in this same way, in language, you also need to learn the basics. Yung grammar, yung letters, yung words, yung rules, yung context, yung punctuations, and so on. And then, pag alam mo na yun, you will use those words. So, sa sentences, paggawa ng essays, ng elementary, pagsusulat ng A, pagsusulat ng B, pagsusulat ng 1. And then, once you have mastered the basics of language by heart, you expand the manner of how you understand and use those words. So, you learn the numerals, this and that. So, nung una, A, B, C, D lang. Sunod, oh, may 1, 2, 3, 4. So, parang match siya. Dati, 1, 2, 3, 4 lang. Ngayon, may negative 1, may negative 2. So, nag-expand yung knowledge natin, yung understanding natin about the language. So, here we have language plus actions equals language game. Additionally, A says the word and B acts on it. So, ibig sabihin lang nito, may nagsasalita or may nagbibigay ng command through language, and this command magigets ni isang person, at itong isang person, gagawin niya yung sinasabi ni first person. Okay, so example nito, kapag sinabi ni teacher na sing, so the teacher says sing, yung mga estudyante, mag-i-start yan kumanta. So, yun. Ganun yung language games. So, language games, basically language plus action. So, equals language game. Next sections, we have sections 10 to 12. So, the word blanks signifies blank and functions as blank. Now, what do the words of this language signify? What is supposed to show what they signify, if not the kind of use they have? So, paano ba siya ginagamit? Diba? So, we can say that A, B, C, D signifies numbers 1, 2, 3, 4. Additionally, like tools in a toolbox, the functions of words are diverse. So, we group hammers, pliers, saws, screwdrivers, rulers, nails, and screws as tools, but they have different purposes. A hammer is different from a saw. Isa pumupukpok, isa naghahati ng mga wood. Even though they are from the same group of tools, magkaiba pa rin sila. Next, the same way words have similarities but have different meanings. So, here's an example. In the Filipino language, gumagamit tayo ng magkaparehong salita, yung tayo, or T-A-Y-O. So, sa unang gamit ay meron tayong tayo. Tayo means us, people. And then, when we say tayo, it means stand. So, here, in this example, makikita natin yung kahit parehong-pareho ng spelling or ng salita, meron pa rin siyang different meanings. Depende sa context, depende sa pagsasabi nito, or sa tono, yun. Okay, last section, sections 13 to 16, distinction. When we say every word in language signifies something, we have so far said nothing whatever unless we have explained exactly what distinction we wish to make. So, in the example of tools, with a distinctive meaning that all tools serve to modify something. So, yung hammer, minomodify niya yung posisyon ng nail, di ba? Pinupukpok mo siya, so naiiba yung posisyon ng nail. And then, yung saw, minomodify niya yung shape ng board or ng wood, and so on. Pero, hindi natin ma-generalize na yung tools, lahat sila nagmo-modify ng something. Kasi, how about the ruler? Ano yung minomodify niya? Ano yung minomodify ng glue? Ano yung minomodify ng nails? So the word signify is perhaps used in the most straightforward way when the object signified is marked with the sign or a certain mark distinction. So, ibig sabihin lang nito na like, madali nating i-label ang isang bagay kapag distinct siya. Or madali natin ma-identify ang isang bagay kapag meron siyang palatandaan, meron siyang label, meron siyang something na alam natin na siya yon. Okay, so example nito ay ang pencil. So makita sa slide na yung pencil, meron siyang sticker na flower. So hindi naman lahat ng pencil may sticker na flower. So ito distinct siya sa lahat ng pencils. Kasi alam mo, nilagyan mo siya ng sticker na flower. So, this is very easy to identify that this particular pencil is what you are looking for. So, it is in this and more or less similar ways that the name means and is given to a thing. We label things. It will often prove useful in philosophy to say to ourselves, naming something is like attaching a label or sticker to a thing.
Section 17. How we group words into kinds will depend on the aim of the classification and on our own inclination. So, for section 17, we can classify words into different groups based sa kanilang functions in a language. For example, the words slab and block are more similar in function than slab and bee. Section 18. Ask yourself whether a language is complete. Is our language complete? The answer is our language is not complete. It is a work in progress na patuloy-tuloy na nag-evolve and nagbabago as time goes by. Katulad dito sa Pilipinas, dati naman wala sa wikang Filipino ang salitang eme at charot. Pero as time goes by, dumadagdag at dumadagdag ang mga salita kasi nga dynamic ang language as we learned in Phil 40. For section 19 to 20, a word can have a different meaning as it may be shortened word of a whole sentence and might confuse someone who's not familiar with it. What you mean is sometimes not translated in what you say when you use a shortened version of the language. For instance, di ba nagkakaroon ng misunderstanding and confusion when we only say the shortened version of what we mean. Katulad ng time na sinabi ko sa kapatid ko yung salitang tubig. Yun lang sinabi ko and ang pumasok sa isip niya is yung bigyan ako ng tubig na iinumin pero ang tinutukoy ko is yung tubig na para hugasan yung watercolor brushes. But how can he get it from just one word without the full sentence, without being unclear, diba? So, our words can create confusion without the proper sentences for the full context. Section 21. A word can have a different meaning as it may be shortened word of a whole sentence, and it might confuse someone who's not familiar with it. Ludwig states that while things like the tone of voice and facial expressions can change between statements and commands, yung main difference niya is what these words do in the language game. Statements share information, while commands naman they tell someone to do something. For example, number one, you will do this. Number two, will you do this? Number three, do this, will you? And they all share the same desire to get the person to do something, diba? Pero the first one is a statement, the second one is a question or politely asking for a favor, and the last one is a command. This section makes readers think about how the language isn't just words, and it's more about what you want to achieve and how you want to use it to communicate. Section 22, Wittgenstein talks about Frege's idea that every statement has an assumption. This section revolves around the German philosopher Frege's ideas that every assertion contains a consumption, an assumption, so he believes that only meaningful sentences is an assertion and that makes an assumption. The passages emphasizes na when we make a statement, hindi lang siya you're just following rules. There's more complex process of thinking and expressing the meaning behind the statement that you said. It's not just about assigning a truth value or reading words without thought. Section 23, multiplicity. And sa section na ito, Wittgenstein's claim that uh, there are more kinds of sentences than just assertions, questions, and commands. Hinahighlight dito yung existence ng maraming magkakaibang gamit ng symbols, words, and sentences sa language. New types of language and language games emerge habang yung iba naman, they become obsolete and forgotten. So it is really safe to say that language is not fixed, rather that it only evolves over time. Section 24, if you do not keep the multiplicity of language games in view, you will perhaps be inclined to ask questions like, what is a question? And this also tackles about solipsism. And this section suggests na it discusses more about bakit importante baguhin yung statements into sentences na nagsisimula sa I think or I believe. This discussion will happen when talking about solipsism, where it is a state of being self centered. And sa both na Section 23 and 24, it seems like Wittgenstein is contradicting what Freak said that only sentences are considered statement that is acceptable to make an assumption. Wittgenstein argued na paano naman yung mga question, commands and exclamation and more. Hindi na ba sila magiging statement? Section 25, animals don't use language, but it does not mean they don't think or play language games. People say that animals can't talk because they don't have the ability to think. This idea suggests that since animals don't think, they can't use language. Pero ang point dito is that animals just don't talk. In fact, it's more accurate to say that they don't use complex forms of language except for very basic communication. Talking, asking questions, telling stories, and having conversations are as natural for humans as activities like walking, eating, drinking, or playing that these animals do. And these forms of communications are deeply ingrained in our behavior, unlike animals. So it's not really fair to say that animals don't think just because they don't have a language. So for sections 26 and 27, it also states that naming is something like attaching a label to a thing. We name things and then we can talk about them and can refer to them in talk. Now, language learning involves giving names to objects katulad sa mga tao, shapes, colors, and emotions. And by attaching labels to them, it asks the question if naming is merely a preparation for using words and if naming alone is enough for talking about things. Sinabi rin yung katulad sa water, help, Are these words just objects? Hindi, di ba? No. They do more than just name things. They have different purposes, which challenges the idea that they're only used as name. If, for example, I say, of course, the byte does not refer to any object at all. It does refer to me agreeing to a context which I can agree to. And asking for names and defining things is a unique language game, as it is inventing names for objects and using those names in speech. It also highlights the unique and intriguing aspect of using someone's name to call them, emphasizing the richness and yung complexity ng language beyond simple naming. And lastly, sections 66 to 71, games don't have a single universal definition. Do all games have something in common? Dinidiscuss dito sa sections na to na yung challenge of defining what exactly is considered a game. If we explain it to someone, baka magbigay tayo ng examples like board games, card games, and sports. However, upon closer examination, mapapansin natin na while these examples share some similarities, such as rules and completion, marami rin silang pagkakaiba. This section contends that instead of searching for a single common feature shared by all games, mas useful kung isipin natin yung games as having family resemblances. Ibig sabihin nito ay isipin natin yung games tulad ng members of our family who share certain characteristics pero hindi lahat same. Madi-differentiate pa rin siya, di ba? For example, within a family, some members of your family might have similar eye colors, similar hair colors, while others might also have a similar way of walking or even yung ugali nila. And this text also mentions that we can use the word game without the need for strict boundaries to define kung ano nga ba yung game o hindi. Tulad ng paggamit natin sa word na number, hindi tayo naghahanap ng exact definition for it. At kino-comprehend lang natin kung ano yung game by observing examples and by understanding its usage sa context na ginagamit natin. So, in short, the main idea conveyed is that defining precisely what a game is can be challenging, but we still effectively use the term game because we comprehend it through examples and its practical usage in everyday language. So, sa pag-explore natin sa ideas ni Wittgenstein about language and meaning, we dive into a series of interconnected concepts of that challenge our traditional understanding of language. From the notion of language, games, and the absence of fixed boundaries and concepts like game to the idea of family resemblance, uh, na tatalakay natin kung ano nga ba yung profound philosophical landscape na tinatalakay ni Wittgenstein. And Wittgenstein also encourages us to view language as a dynamic and adaptable tool, that it isn't confined by rigid rules, pero instead it's deeply rooted na sa ating diverse activities and forms of life. This perspective prompts us to reconsider language not just as a set of strict definitions, but also it is multifaceted and context dependent medium through which we communicate. So, to sum it all up, Wittgenstein's ideas shows us that language is more complex than just words in a dictionary. It is all about how we use it in our everyday lives. And this discovery reminds us that language is para siyang buhay, lagi siyang nagbabago, nag-a-adapt, nag evolve. Kaya dapat natin siyang i-appreciate kung gaano siya kayaman at gaano siya ka-intricate sa ating araw-araw na pamumuhay. Thank you for listening to our group presentation. Once again, I am Lana Bakita and I am with my group mate Rosette Perez for our presentation in philosophy from BAAP 1AA.